lungs taste the air of time blown past fallen sand.
Greetings everyone, and welcome to another sparring session. As you can see by the timestamp on this video, this is going to be a bit of a chunky one. This is a Dagger Duel with one of the long-standing members of the club who I don't get to see nearly enough, so we launch straight into it ferociously. I will try and stop after each play and explain what's going on. Here, we both lunge in. He tries to stop me from getting my blade on him, but I basically power through his bladed arm and strike him in the temple, while he strikes me sort of around the neck region. Exhausted by this first exchange, I now hunker down for a little bit of a rest. What I'm actually doing is experimenting with level changes here. I go from very low to very high. I use my raised hand to grab his knife hand. I then try and thrust in at him, but he manages to keep my blade off in much the same way. But then I break loose, and just with a bit of a push and a low strike and a high strike, I manage to sink home in his neck. Because the rondels we're fighting with we assume to be sharp on the point but not on the edges, this strike here that rubs up against my face, while sucky, would probably not have given me too much of a problem. But if that had been a sharp knife, obviously it would have lacerated my face. However, my thrust into his neck would surely have been a kill shot. After a little bit of jumping around and dodging and missing, we then adopt the ice pick grip, which some of you who read Meyer's treatises on dagger fighting will be familiar with. After a few missed strikes, we get to see a beautiful example of a decent defense and attack. I use the blade of my arm to sort of displace his blade. I take it in the bicep while delivering a downward thrust to the neck. I'm not sure how hard his hit actually landed. It's hard to tell in the slow-mo, but I'm going to assume that it pierced my arm. Less than ideal, but probably not fatal. This, however, definitely would have been. I actually turn here so we can see what's happened. He tried to stab me in the guts, I caught his hand, and I threw a overhead strike directly down into his mask and, by extension, his face. I'm not actually holding his wrist with my hand, I've just used my bladed arm to sort of lock it out. Beautiful. I'm quite happy with that one. Ooh, a fancy little blade adjustment there. Let's see that in slow-mo. A little flick of the wrist and a roll of the fingers. Very elegant. Unlike that move, I basically run in here and sort of slap his blade down and out the way and deliver a brutal overhand strike to the temple. My initial hit essentially stopped his momentum with the blade, so he couldn't deliver a follow-up strike. Ah, classic. Put your hand too far forward and lose the hand. Using the bird hand, I slap his blade out the way and try and stab him in the head. He parries, tries to grab my wrist, I break free, parry his blade, bring my arm over, try to slash again, he pushes me away, and we both call it a day. Yeah, he misses me in this one. He throws the shot a little too soon. I still blade his arm out the way as a precaution and ram my blade into his guts. He then finds my throat and does a little thrust of his own. We take a few moments now to sort of size each other up and try and work out the next strategy. These long, drawn-out sparring sessions are great for just a little bit of creative blade work and to, really work out what makes your opponent tick and have a good old fight together. I lunge in with quite an aggressive thrust here, and I have to sort of panic push his blade to the side, which just grazes my throat. I then follow it up with a overhand strike to the neck. A little bit of blade fencing here. You can still use the Krumpau, the god amongst fencing moves, even if it's with just a short little dagger, as I demonstrate here. It's interesting watching this go down in slow motion. These little Krumpau strikes are pushing his blade offline and killing his momentum. I then dip my blade down and catch it on the back of my hand. He tries to lock me out. I try to stab him. We fist bump. I bring my point on line as if to say, come no closer. A little bit of an unconventional strike here. I actually learned to fight with a scramps axe, a kind of edged blade, and so I forget, and it bleeds through into my fight, and I end up just sort of attacking with what I think is an edge, but it's obviously just the rod of the rondel. Ah, what the hell is that thing? Oh, the hall is something of a goblin infestation.
Good to see you, man.
Oh, bugger. I appear to have killed my opponent. Oh dear. What happens here is I grab his knife hand, and the way he's standing means that his entire center of balance is over on his right side, and then with my thrust to the very tippity top of his helmet, it basically throws him off balance and he falls. And he plays dead. Which isn't going to work, because I know he's only pretending. He gets a very fast strike on me here. He's hit me before I even start to try and defend myself, and my riposte is so late I might as well not have bothered. After intercepting his attacking hand with my left hand, I use the age-old street tactic of the overhead sucker punch to attack him in the temple with the blade. I just look to be stuck pressing the power attack button at the moment. I grab his arm and I miss with a ridiculous overhead strike. He then rushes in with a very lightning fast thrust to my chest that I can't defend. I then spam power attack again and miss again. How embarrassing. Some more aggressive blade fencing. Using my thumb in a strong grip on the blade, I push his point offline to my right. He tries again. I push him off to my left. A bit closer than he was that time. He then tries again. I push him offline to my right again. I abandon all finesse in this next move and go from having very well controlled, very precise strikes to a whopping great overhand slap to the head. Again with these beatdowns. I miss the thrust, he misses his thrust, I bonk him on the top of the head, and then I see fit to push his blade offside again, and then thrust him in the neck. The audience and my opponent are now complaining about my slapping. I have to explain that you wouldn't want to get hit in the face with a rondel like that, but yes, it is indeed because I've trained to fight knives with more choppy blades than stabby blades. Nice solid defense here, if I do say so myself. I'm using the blade of my rondel to attack his fingers and thus push his blade offline so he can't stab me. We then twiddle our knives at one another. Outrageous. Start a new entry in the Book of Grudges. Let it be known my opponent ducked, stabbed me dangerously close to my crotch, waited until I was turned, and stabbed me where the sun does not shine. After being mocked by my opponent, I exact swift and brutal vengeance. I grab his blade, I drag him in nice and close to me. While advancing menacingly towards him, I wrap his blade and his blade arm around his neck, smother him in my chest, and then start stabbing him repeatedly in the back, while he taps for mercy, which I do not give him. Grudge settled. Let it be known the Atreides will not let a stab to the backside go unanswered. Very nice. He attacks low with a feint and then actually goes high. I miss my defense and he stabs me in the side of the head. You might want to pay extra close attention now, because the highlight of the fight is coming up, and it's actually quite interesting. My opponent attacks my side, and I blade my arm so aggressively he drops his knife. Not about to let this opportunity go to waste, I then boot his blade out of reach, meaning that he now does not have a knife. Now what the hell just happened? My opponent tries to grab my knife arm, which I pull back. I grab his shoulder. I then deliver a strike to his ribs, another strike to his guts. As I'm falling, I throw another strike to his head. While I'm still falling, I throw my absolute last strike to his face, and then perform a commando roll so that I don't just land completely on my head. And as you can hear, the crowd goes wild. So impressed by my forward roll were my opponent's shoes that they simply untied their own laces, meaning we had to have a short intermission. This was a cool little exchange. So my opponent thrusts in at me and I managed to slap his blade down and out of the way, but don't feel I can attack just yet, so I wait. He then attacks again and stabs my wrist again. I wait. This time, he attacks, I slap his blade out of the way and throw a thrust but miss, bring my point back online. He rushes in, grab his hand, and then I blast him across the face with one of those downward slap strikes again. This would surely hurt if it was a rondel, and if it was pointing forward enough it might even slash the face, but not an ideal strike, but nonetheless it would stun your opponent. Lovely little strike here. My opponent goes to thrust low, feints, and then thrusts high, catching me in the front of the mask. My blade falls short. He then attacks again, not seeming to know that I'm already dead, and I miss my riposte slap cut again. Very cool dodge here. Well, it would have been if I hadn't already been stabbed before I performed it. Nice little volley of proficient parries there. He then comes in and places his blade to my throat, seeming to forget that it's a rondel. I stab him, he remembers he's using a rondel and stabs me. My opponent and I agree upon 4 more good hits for the end of the fight. There's one, a stab to the arm. There's another. Wait, we've seen this before. This is almost exactly what happened earlier in the fight. I engage his blade hand, I thrust him in the head, and because he's off balance, he can be tilted and dropped on his side. A little bit more blade fencing. I just about stopped my opponent from stabbing me in the heart I put my arm out to defend. I then throw a cut over the top and catch him in the mask. His blade falls short. And that's a wrap, the final strike of the fight being a thrust to the forehead. All in all, an excellent fight, very well fought on both sides. Thank you for watching, and if you would like to see more of this kind of content in the future, please consider subscribing.